Hey everybody, Rob John Webb here for Waxadisc, and welcome to episode 4, where this week I'm going to discuss peaks and troughs, dips and lows. So when you're producing music and you're producing it for a while, or you've been doing it for a year, a relatively short time, you're going to have days where you can't do it, and you're going to have days where you can do it. And it's pretty much okay to go through those motions and not worry too much about it. I can punish myself many times where if I'm in a rut creatively, I can tend to sit on myself for a while and just sit back and just not do anything. And then the process of that is I punish myself for not being creative, not doing something with my time. And that's a difficult thing to manage sometimes, but it's okay. It's a normal thing to manage. So there will be times in your creative life when you are going on a ride and you're going up and up and you're doing really well and you're banging out music. You've probably got 3 or 4 tracks done in the space of a couple of weeks. You're really flowing, and then all of a sudden it comes to the end of those tracks where you've got to probably fine tune them and mix them and get them right and do the little details on them that you've overlooked whilst producing the tracks because you've been on a roll. And then when it comes to fine tuning the engine, you kind of sometimes can hit a brick wall because you're like, oh, I've heard this song so many times now. I love it, but I just want to get it out. So then you put it to the back and then you probably start something new. That's usually a common thing that people do. I've done it myself. And then you end up forgetting about those projects. But then what happens is if you do 3 or 4 tracks, for example, you get so far and then it's time to really fine tune them. You can get disheartened and you put it off, and that's when you dip. And then you bail out on those projects, and then you leave it for a bit because you know you've done them, so you feel accomplished that you've done them. But then in the other breath, you think, oh, I need to get them finished. I want to get them out. And it's that last part of the journey of the leg that you have to really kind of focus on and put all your discipline into it. Because the fun side of it is over. The creating and the arranging and the going, yes, I've made a good track. That's over. The part that's now about to begin is the difficult part. So you can, dwell on it as much as you can. You still have to push yourself that bit further. And that can be disheartening, and that can sometimes be off-putting, and that's what puts you back into the, to the dip, into the trough, so to speak. So you have the peak, and then you have the trough. Well, sometimes some people love that part of the process. I mean, I personally hate mixing down. I hate doing the fine technical stuff. It's rewarding, no doubt, but it's not the fun part of making music. People think making music, you just bang a track together and that's it. You just put sound on top of sound and you're away. They don't realise that the hours and the agony that go into mixing a track. So yeah, there's one element of why we dip. We sometimes run away from the work because it's not impossible, but it's just difficult and it's laborious, and we know that it's a hard thing to get through. So it's kind of like one of those things that you just have to really discipline yourself, not be motivated, but you have to be disciplined. Because the motivation is over. You're motivated to make the track. Now you've got to be disciplined. There's 2 different things, in my opinion. So yeah, peaks and troughs. Let's kind of get back to that. So in my career, I've had moments where back in the 90s, for example, when I first started making music and I had a sampler and a keyboard and an Atari ST, that's all I had. And I was making probably 2 or 3 tracks a day. I'm not joking. I would literally churn out demo after demo, sampling this part of record, sampling that record, and I was just on a roll. And none of the tracks were any good. They weren't release worthy, but it was a process I had to go through in order to get good, in order to release something of a higher quality. But when I listen back to those demos now, I'm like, oh my God, that's terrible. But the idea is great. The idea was good. It was something there. Some of the samples had already been used. I was sampling off vinyl. So in those days, we didn't have the internet. So you had to use what you had around you. And for me, it was record collections and sampling bits off video movies and off films and putting the tape recorder and plug it into the back of the video and taking the audio out and stuff like that. Creative stuff, nevertheless, but quite primitive. But anyway, I was going through all these peaks of banging demos out and I get dead excited, and then I'd make another one and another one. And I can't remember being in troughs very much in the 90s. I can't remember being in dips. I can remember being constantly just working towards something. I didn't know what it was, but I was working towards something. I would have had them. I just don't remember them. I just remember making lots of demos. But as the years have gone by, over the last 10 years or so, as I've got older, making music has become obviously a lot less. I kind of make tracks now when I really feel like it, rather than feeling that I have to. I don't feel like I need to keep up my musical journey. Most producers will have a release a month lined up. So, you have one release every month or every 2 months. That's a great healthy thing to do. But all of those releases would have been made the year before, probably by those artists. So you're always a year behind and a year ahead, if that makes sense. So that's probably a good thing to do, actually, thinking about that. If you want to get some tracks out, get your 5 tracks ready, 6 tracks, lay them out for, for releasing, like, for example, April, June, July, August, whatever. But yeah, so that you have got continuous music out rather than going into dips. So if you release a track that you've just made and you've not got nothing else lined up after it, it's probably a good thing to, if you want continuity, is to have 5 or 6 songs ready to release every other month, say, for example. So you've got a continuous flow of releases. And that way, when you're in dips, when you're in the studio, you don't feel so bad because you've got records coming out. So there's one way of looking at it. But for me, as I say, going back to releasing music when I feel like it now, producing music doesn't get harder. I mean, it's the irony of music software today is that it's so easy, but we're so overwhelmed with the amount of product we have. We can sometimes paralyze ourselves and cripple ourselves by not releasing because we have too much choice in the studio. Like I said, when I was churning out demos back in the 90s on just a sampler and an Atari, I was putting loads out because all I had around me was my records to sample and, the odd keyboards, with like a handful of presets on. Now we've got a million presets. Like I said last week in last week's podcast, we've got all these different drum racks, all these different sample loop packs. We are infinitely, surrounded by an infinite amount of product, and it cripples you because you end up diving into one samples pack or one preset bank and you just get lost for hours and you end up not creating anything. So as I say, less is more. But with peaks and troughs, as I say, you can go on a roll and you can be making stuff, and then all of a sudden nothing for a month, sometimes 2 months, nothing will come out. And it's kind of frustrating, but what you've got to remember is it's all part of the journey. There is nothing wrong with it. It's the way it is. You can be creative 1 minute, totally empty the next. Depends what you do. And also the weather can play a part on it. It definitely plays a part for me. When it gets to winter, it's cold, it's snowy, I tend to go back to more ambient piano stuff sometimes. You don't want to make a sunshine tune, do you? Where I live in England, the weather's chaotic. So, we don't have that constant sunshine. So, for example, if I lived in Ibiza all year round, I'd probably make really happy, sunshiny music because I'm affected by the weather. I don't know if anyone else is, but I am. And then as the spring starts to come around, I'm starting to get a bit more vibey and I start to put a few more dance tracks out. It's a weird circle of, release mentality that I have. But yeah, as I say, peaks and troughs, you get them, they come and they go. Just remember that the bad times pass away just like the good times, no matter what it is in life. And your creativity, ebbs and flows. It comes and it goes. It's just like the tide, in and out, in and out. So yeah, if you're worried about, you're not releasing enough or you're not even finishing tracks, which I get a lot of people tell me they're not finishing tracks. Again, overwhelmed by what they have in the studio. Limit yourself. Just limit yourself to 2 or 3 synths and just stick with them for now and get your tracks finished and then fine tune them. Do the hard part last. In terms of, mixing down, I'm saying. So yeah, peaks and troughs. If you're having any sort of, drought, a creative drought, just remember, just sit back, sit with yourself, don't worry about it. Go and do something else. Go and do some gardening. Go do a bike ride. Go and play football, whatever it is you're interested in outside of music. Go ahead and do that because it's really healthy to break free when you are stuck in a rut and you don't know where to go with your music. I personally, I just go for walks or I'll watch some historical film or whatever, or even revert back to DJing. If I've got no creativity within me, I'll go and do something on the decks, or I'll go through some records and play something that makes me feel good or tries to inspire me. I won't go searching for it. I won't go, right, I've got to make a track, I've got to find a sample or I've got to do something. I will literally just sit with it, play a few records and just let it come out of me. And then I'll go away and do something. and then a week later it will return and the creativity juices will flow again. But as I say, it's part and parcel of the journey. Don't punish yourself with it at all. So yeah, that's this week's episode, all and done. Don't forget to share this with your friends, and hit that like button if you haven't already. Thank you guys, and I will speak to you next week.